What's up, Spider Nation? This is episode number 8, I think, of Spider-Man's Tangled WebShow. Yes, we've managed to get through 7 episodes, and now we are on episode number 8. That is fantastic. I actually think that's a pretty good run, considering the fact that we almost didn't have past episode number 5. Or was it episode number 4? I don't even remember at this point. But luckily, it is, what's the date today? Is it May 17th? I believe
May 17th.
May 17th, we got a solid amount of episodes under us. Not as many as we would have liked to have had in about 4 months, but a decent number of episodes for a quote-unquote new podcast. But that man who answered my question a few seconds ago, his name is James. Say hello to the people, James.
Hello, and welcome to, I guess, a new podcast. Was this like your third reboot then, if this is the new podcast? No, I'm just...
No, I don't...
No, I'm messing with you.
Yes. Yes, we are on volume number 3, and we are about to reboot and renew our vows once again.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah, and in a couple of months, you know, I will delete. I screwed up. Damn it! Sorry, I flubbed my own words. I'm gonna swap brains. I said delete brains. At first, I was gonna say, I'm like, no, that doesn't work. I'm gonna swap brains with Jonathan, and then me and him are going to be trying to fight to get our brains back together for about 31 episodes, and then I'm going to claim that I'm the superior Jonathan, as I completely ruin his life, but at the same time make his life more awesome because I'm just an awesome character.
And I will give James a little Power Rangers reference here. So if we're technically fighting for the control of the same body, does that make me Jared and you Daishi?
No, that makes us the Pink and Blue Ranger from Mighty Morphin when they did a body swap episode.
Oh, that's terrifying. But I also kind of
it's
want
also
to see
terrifying.
that.
The Japanese footage never touched that. So during the Japanese footage, Blue's fighting like Blue and Pink's fighting like a girl. Not trying to be sexist, but she's doing like the little hi-yas and stuff like that. And the manly punches are coming from the boy. But yet you're supposed to think that it's Kimberly in the blue body and Billy in the girl body.
Whenever someone says Power Rangers action sequence, I always think of Jason David Frank going, "Ayah! Ayah! Ayah!"
Which Disney made him edit. Disney made him edit those because it sounded like swear words they said.
Okay, I just did the "ayah" noise, and all of a sudden I heard laughing outside of my door. I'm assuming that some member of my family is now laughing at me. That's okay. I'll deal with that. I got called a hippie today. That I've officially hit rock bottom. That's only going uphill. Yes, for various reasons, I got called a hippie today. I'm not sure why. It was demeaning. I will say this right now. No offense to any hippies out there. I have no means to offend you. Okay, I'm gonna shut up now.
Hey.
So
Hey, Ultimate Uncle Ben was a hippie.
Yes. Okay. We'll just leave that right where we'll leave that right where it is. As in, I'm gonna get the crap sued out of me. I'm gonna get sued into third world poverty. Okay. What is tonight's show gonna be about? There was a new issue of Secret Wars this week. We're actually gonna hold off on that discussion for another week. We'll probably talk about that on the next episode when we have. I believe it's Amazing Spider-Man 18.1 to talk about, so we'll talk about some new comics next week. But this week we're going to go a little bit of a blast from the past, and we're actually going to go back about 9 or 10 years, depending on when. I don't actually remember when this storyline came out, but we're going to talk about Civil War, the Amazing Spider-Man centric portions of Civil War, specifically Amazing Spider-Man number 532 to 538. 7-issue arc entitled "The War at Home," which is basically detailing Peter Parker obviously taking off the mask, revealing who he is, quote unquote, registering with the Superhuman Registration Act, and all of that wonderful stuff. This was a very controversial storyline within the Spider-Man fan community. Excuse me, I just burped there. I apologize. It was a very controversial storyline within the community. A lot of people were saying, okay, you know, Spider-Man would have never taken off his mask, and then there's some people who were saying, oh yes, well he would have done this, he would have done that, and it was a major point of debate, and still a major point of debate among.
And then you find out the real world reason why Marvel did it. They're like, fuck it, he's gonna be comic rebooted in a couple months anyways or one more day, so just do whatever the fuck you want with him in Civil War. Who cares? There's no consequences.
Just make it miserable. Just bring out that old Parker Luck. Yes, because that's what the Parker Luck actually is.
No, because they did what I want to give right credit. I think it's Michael Bailey with his podcast who says it for it. It's like the vacuum cleaner salesman effect, where it's like, oh, we'll dirty up your carpet and then vacuum clean it, and then we'll take credit for, oh, look how clean it is. Well, no shit, because you just dirtied it on me. And that's kind of what Marvel did with Spider-Man here.
That's a good point.
They're like, oh, Peter's going to unmask and go in the black suit and want to kill a lot of people. Oh, Brand New Day fixed all that. You're welcome. No, you caused that problem to get the Brand New Day.
That's a good analogy. I'd never thought of that. I did have a teacher once. Back in the old days. I had a teacher once, and he said, a vacuum salesman comes into my house, and he's like, he brings in this new model of vacuum, and he tells me to go get the vacuum I currently own, and he says, look how much this vacuum picks up. But he never showed me if it was really more dirt than my vacuum picks up. So that's just a classic vacuum story that I always think of whenever someone says that. I don't know what I just typed on my phone. But so we're going to talk about Civil War, a very controversial storyline, and it's one that I think James and I may actually disagree on based on our prior conversations previous to this podcast. So this may be a bit of an interesting episode where you may see the co-hosts
there might
actually kind of go more. It might be a literal civil war. It may be. So we will see how exciting this episode actually gets. So basic synopsis of Civil War. We kind of already run through it. But Amazing Spider-Man 532. Basically, this is the issue where Peter Parker. Actually, you know what? Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe it's not right to just jump into the issue immediately. I think we need to give a few background thoughts on Civil War in general before we dive into the actual issues. So
and this is a movie tie-in, because for all the people who's getting ready for Captain America Civil War next year, think of this as kind of like your cheat sheet backstory for it.
Yes, except we don't have Elizabeth Olsen and Paul Bettany and Anthony Mackie playing the new Avengers. And whoever the other, Don Cheadle. Yes, Don Cheadle, War Machine. Who, by the way, did they ever explain why he randomly went back to War Machine? I don't think they ever explained that.
Somebody said, because there was a 3-hour edit of that movie that it got cut out, that maybe War Machine helping out with the efforts with the Meteorite City thingy that Ultron was doing in the finale, that maybe, maybe War Machine also flew in the house. No, it's Falcon. Because War Machine does show up, right? Oh, sorry, I got them both confused. Now people are going to think I'm racist, but whatever. But, like, Falcon, I think, was kind of weird how he's an Avenger now. Like, I think that portion got cut out.
Yeah, who knows? But, so, basically, with Civil War, it's all built around this idea of the Superhuman Registration Act. And what that act basically says is that these superpowered individuals need to be held accountable, whether they're hero, villain, whatever. They need to register their name and all of their information with the government, and they will be held accountable for their actions. That way, in situations such as massive collateral damage, casualties of any kind, they can be held responsible legally in legal procedures. That's basically the gist of the Superhuman Registration Act. And I want to get general thoughts on the Superhuman Registration Act as it is as it stands. Is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Is it corrupt government BS? Is it legitimate government actions? What is it?
It was clearly trying to hit that point because in 2006 with the Bush administration and everything, what was going on with actual wars in the United States and political, it's clear that Marvel was capitalizing on it because let's just say, as a teenager from Wisconsin in a highly democratic area, George Bush wasn't really, everybody's favorite president here. So, let's just say I was definitely on Cap's side for most of this just because, politically it came across as, well, Iron Man's side's wrong because it's kind of like they were the Republicans and Cap was the Democrat. Like, Marvel was clearly building up that, whatever political side you actually see yourself as is going to be whose side you were on, because they actually went legit political with Civil War at times. It felt like
They did dive a majorly into politics during various points throughout Civil War. I think my general thoughts on the Superhuman Registration Act. Someone told me once that I was a liberal. I kind of disagree with that. I tend to think of myself as more of a person who uses common sense most of the time, because there are Republican ideas I agree with and there are Democratic ideas I agree with. I think that there are decent parts to the Superhuman Registration Act. And I think there are decent parts of Civil War. I think there are parts of it that are really screwed up. I understand needing to hold superheroes accountable, but I also think that the idea that senators and all these high-ranking political officers, they put their lives on the line every day because they have their name out there. They don't have anything to hide. I'm like, but they're also not dealing with the likes of Dr. Doom and all these crazy.
I don't know if did you ever read the actual Civil War, like the actual miniseries?
I've read a few issues of it. I've mainly read the Spider-Man stuff.
Because the first issue, she always had this thing where she never trusted the superheroes. She thought S.H.I.E.L.D. should police everybody and there's no need for them. And in the first issue of New Avengers, she kind of goes out the first arc where she's like, you don't have no right, Tony, to reform the Avengers. And Cap's like, actually, in my S.H.I.E.L.D. contract, I got a right to form a team whatever I want, and I'm calling this new team the New Avengers, so you can't stop me. So she always kind of had this anti-superhero stance, but she really went overboard to get to the point of Cap turning on the Restoration Act by Cap saying, you want me to arrest my friends? And she's like, I want you to arrest supervillains. And he goes, you really think like Spider-Man and Human Torch and Daredevil are supervillains? She goes, last time I checked, their definition of a supervillain is a person who breaks the law and wears a mask. And it's like, the Restoration Act didn't even become law yet, and she's already asking him to arrest and possibly murder his friends because they're breaking the law, a law that's not even in law yet.
It's kind of I almost feel like we have to tiptoe a bit around the political aspects of this particular storyline with this.
I'm not trying to get political with this. It's just like, but it's kind of hard when you talk about the comics or like Civil War, because this whole thing was, let's bring up actual real life political shit that's going on in the country and see how the Marvel characters be affected by them doing something like this. Like, how would the current political, whether it be controversy or whatever, or whatever's going on in politics in America, because they kind of did that also with Dark Reign, how it was the Obama administration that brought in Norman, if you read those issues.
Yes, and
I did that again.
And I just think, like, I really do think that the idea of, these high-ranking political officers, they put their lives on the line every day by having their face out there. Yes, but they're not dealing with Dr. Doom. They're not dealing with, Electro. They're not dealing with the threats that these guys are. I'm not saying that the threats they're dealing with are not, of great seriousness and of great power, but it's not even remotely the same, I don't think. So
it was weird, like, just to make people, like, Civil War, just to have an excuse for why all these heroes that were friends, and pretty much, if they would have done this, like, right after Disassemble, I can see it, because all the heroes were no longer trusting each other on the same side, the Avengers were no more. But this was at a part where the Marvel Universe was pretty much one big happy family. Like, they all got along. Spider-Man revealed his secret identity to everybody. The Avengers were reformed. Everybody was buddy-buddies. And then out of nowhere, it's like, because of this act, everybody wants to kill each other. And even, like, the civilians got stupid, I think. Because, yeah, kids died when the school blew up, when that whole thing happened that began the Civil War arc in Stanford. People died, including children. I get that. But comics have always had collateral damage with cities blowing up and people dying. And nobody thought about a Restoration Act before. But now in Civil War it happens, and it's like, we're going to beat up the Fantastic Four outside of a nightclub, and they can't defend themselves because it's regular people beating them up. and they're blaming the Fantastic Four for something where even Johnny goes, hey, we were off saving the planet from something else going on at the time. It's not my fault. And then getting labeled a child killer as everybody beat him and his girlfriend nearly to death. Because they were child killers, because they were out protecting the planet somewhere else when the Stanford incident happened. It was like people were acting weird just to get across that it's political. Like we're trying to be smart and being political here.
And I will say, whenever someone says superhero collateral damage, I think Man of Steel. Just think Man of Steel. I'm pretty sure that just started a riot by me saying that, because whenever someone mentions Man of Steel, it's more nuclear than mentioning Amazing Spider-Man 2. Those two movies tend to set people off. I don't know why. So the Superhuman Registration Act. It's not a completely good idea. In fact, it's in some ways I kind of understand it. In other ways, it's kind of bullshit. It's just it's not the way you would ideally want to deal with things. And I will touch a bit on the prologue, which was the road to Civil War. Amazing 529 to 531. I will touch briefly on that because I also did reread that in preparation for this discussion. Yes, Mr. Parker goes to Washington, and I will say right off the bat though, a big positive of that, I really do like the Iron Spider suit. For those of you who do not know what the Iron Spider suit actually is, first of all, James, don't put your hair in your mouth. That's disgusting. I just yelled at him like I'm his dad. But what was I even saying right now? Oh my gosh.
You're bringing up the Iron Spider.
Yes, for those of you who don't know what the Iron Spider suit is, it's basically Spider-Man but Iron Man style. It's the Spider-Man costume with Iron Man color scheme, and obviously Iron Man materials, and obviously 4 retractable spider legs on the back, which is actually really cool. Basic prologue. Initially, in this little Mr. Parker goes to Washington story, Tony Stark is against the Superhuman Registration Act. He's willing to go to Washington and fight it basically as hard as he can. And during that time, he actually hires, I believe it's Titanium Man. I believe that's his name. I could be wrong about that. But he hires Titanium Man to actually make an attempt on his life so that Spider-Man will save him. I apologize. So he hires Titanium Man to actually make an attempt on his life so that Spider-Man will save him and prove his point that superheroes and all of them, that they are good and that the Registration Act would only do negative things that would impact them. And basically that doesn't work so well, and the prologue ends with the Stanford incident, which I believe the Stanford incident, obviously it is the catalyst towards Tony Stark actually becoming in support of the Superhuman Registration Act in veiled terms, but also the Stanford incident. I believe, is it over 600 casualties that incident caused? I believe that's the number.
It's about 600, a little under. It's like I remember reading tie-in with it from another book. I think it was Fantastic Four, but they say it was a little bit under 600, and Spider-Man says it's over 600. Marvel had a few inconsistencies with Civil War. Let's just say that.
And after all this fighting that Tony Stark had done against the Superhuman Registration Act, he'd gone before Congress during the prologue. He actually took Peter Parker with him because during this time Peter Parker was kind of Tony Stark's right-hand man at this point.
He was a sidekick almost.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I think that's, and Peter would call him boss. Not really because he respected him that much, but because he knew it pissed Tony off, which is funny in its own way.
I kind of like that, because when you reread that era, when Peter joined the New Avengers in his own book, you really get a sense of, when you read the Spider-Man books, not really the actual Avenger books, because Peter was just there to be the class clown making the jokes. But when you read the Spider-Man books that were going on with the New Avenger era in the early days, he always felt out of place. They would always ask, "Why didn't you call us to take down this foe?" And he goes, because I'm not used to calling on you guys. I'm not even. I don't really think of myself as an Avenger. I don't think I'm worthy enough. And they keep on telling him, "You are, Peter. Next time you need trouble, call us." Because and then like I think that's why I always thought like why he would call him bots. Like one way he used to say it was a joke because I know it gets underneath Tony's skin, but I think it's because he doesn't see himself on their level. He's not their partner. He sees himself more as an employee of the Avengers, kind of. I think.
Exactly, and that makes perfect sense to me, and I believe that is a logical moment for Peter Parker, and that whole prologue story. It's almost kind of an antithesis to what Civil War actually becomes in its main arc. Where Tony Stark is very much against the Superhuman Registration Act for basically the same reasons that I just outlined, because of how it compromises superheroes, because of how much more danger they are in, because of everything they need to protect. He does discuss that, and Peter actually comes in his Iron Spider suit at one point and tries to make that point to Congress as Spider-Man, and Tony Stark says, "You moron! They're not going to listen to you at all."
Yeah,
Tony had.
Spider-Man is the one hero in the Marvel Universe why they would want to do this.
Yeah, and really, it's like Tony has a complete point there. It's like, Peter, that was probably the worst thing you could have done. If you'd thought that through for about 1 second, you would have realized that was a bad idea.
Because often all the political people that are for and against it are going to go anti-Spider-Man.
Exactly, and so it's a pretty interesting. It's a pretty interesting 3 issues, but also in those 3 issues, Peter basically sells his soul to Tony. He says, Tony says, you have to, by making this agreement to come with me and be my right-hand man, you basically, you have to go with me no matter what. You are in this with me no matter what. And Peter agrees to that initially because he thinks Tony's on the right side. And I believe that Tony was on the right side initially by being against the Superhuman Registration Act. But then the Stanford incident happens, and Tony sees, this act, there's no point in fighting it anymore. Look at what's happened here. There is no fight. And this is where it gets into really the whole...
If you read Civil War, they give a more good reason for why he flip-flops, where when you read Amazing and other books, it's like, well, what happened? Why is he not for it? But if you actually read Civil War, he goes to the funeral of one of the kids that died, and the mother spits in her face, and she starts an activism group about, it's your fault, you didn't stop it. And Tony's left staying there as all these people in this, funeral for kids are saying it's all his fault. So with Tony, with the messed up, Tony's a messed up character from alcoholism to whatnot, going on to nearly multiple breakdowns, where he can disassemble himself. He kind of is standing there with everybody saying it's all your fault. So I can see why he'll go, then I'm going to fix this. I'm going to be pro-registration. I'm going to be in front of it and everything. And that's kind of like his motive for doing it, is that he does have good intentions, and that I'm getting guilt-tripped, kind of. Like, people are blaming me for this, and I'm taking their word for it, and I'm going to fix this problem. Any means necessary.
And that is kind of the problem when you have a company-wide crossover like Civil War was for Marvel. You do have different writers with different ideas, and that is kind of a problem, that it wasn't established so well in Amazing Spider-Man that Tony was so feeling guilty about it, because I actually do remember that.
He becomes a supervillain in Amazing.
Yeah, he basically does become the villain of Amazing Spider-Man, and a lot of people think he was the villain of Civil War.
I always take the stance that there is no villain. The villain of Civil War is the Restoration Act. And I'm not getting political, but I think the Restoration Act is the villain because that's the whole thing, that catalyst that causes everything.
Exactly, and
there is no good guy, because that's another problem with Civil War. If I can interrupt you for a second, bring this up back, just to add a little more clarity. One of the problems that a lot of writers and with Marvel and editors said at the time is, Marvel, if Mark Miller would have came out, who was the mastermind behind Civil War, if he would have came out and would have said, okay, here's the bylaws, and they would have printed it out in the first early issues of Civil War and the other tie-in books for Civil War, if they would have printed out, okay, here's what the Restoration Act says, this is how the rules state it goes, and then you can choose what side, if you agree with it or don't agree with it, and whose side you're on by that. Marvel didn't do that, though. They just vaguely said Superhero Resurrection Act, heroes got to be masked by the law, and some other stuff. And so, depending on the political point of views of the writer or the editor of a title, or whose side that hero was on, the Resurrection Act was either shown in a super cool light of how you need it, and then you got like Amazing Spider-Man or Captain America or New Avengers where it was like Nazi.
And that is a valid point, and I do think that would have aided the Civil War event in a pretty significant way if they had printed the actual act in one of the issues. That would have been a very, very significant improvement to it, because I do agree with your stance on that and how it should have been done. And basically, the Stanford incident is Tony's catalyst to becoming pro-registration. In Amazing Spider-Man, it's kind of laid out that he's all about the law is how it has to be. You know, the law is the law, whether it's right or wrong. It's how it has to be. And
this is not how he acted in his own title or Civil War. He was kind of like, yeah, the law is not good, but we have to do this. And then later on, once he gets the power and everything, oh, I'm the new Nick Fury and everything, and he's there in the S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier at the end of the book, that's when he really takes the stance of almost like, I'm the villain of the story, and he's accepting it. Like, he's accepting it, yeah, law is law, and I'm going to go with the law. But in those early issues, it's a soul burn to him being there. Where in Amazing, he's all like, law is law.
It's inconsistent writing, yeah, in basic terms, inconsistent writing. But with Tony Stark here, he basically says, apologies, I am coming off of like a virus or whatever. I've been sick the past couple of days, so I apologize if I'm coughing or snively or whatever. I apologize for that. But Tony takes the stance of pro-registration, and he says, you know, Peter Parker, you gave me your word that no matter what, you are on my side. You know, you would stand by me no matter what. And Peter asks, you know, are you really asking me to take off my mask and register with the government, reveal my identity to everyone? Are you really asking me to do that? And he's like, you know, Tony basically says that you know, it's how it is. He technically doesn't say that he is, but he technically doesn't say that he isn't. He's basically saying it's how it is. And so Peter goes to Aunt May and Mary Jane and discusses the idea with them. He talks about how, you know, he's always had to fear, how he's always feared, you know, what would happen if someone learned his secret identity. He's always, you know, feared having to make this decision, how it would happen. And, you know, his family, it's actually Aunt May who comes out in support of the idea. She says, you know, I was angry that people did not see you the way I saw you. You know, people don't see you as the hero. And, you know, I'm angry that you don't get the recognition you deserve. And she says, I think it's time that you got, you know, the praise and the honor that you deserve. And so Mary Jane says, oh, yeah, you know, let's go with that because, you know, Aunt May's the best because she totally knows everything.
Well, I didn't get that sense from Mary Jane. I got the sense of she felt the same way, but she's more the supporting wife where she's like, Peter, whatever you want to do, but she's kind of agreeing with May, but at the same time, she's supporting her husband. She's like, Peter, I'm with you no matter what side you pick, and Aunt May's more the one saying, well, I think this is the better thing for us. So I think it's more, Mary Jane doesn't want to say it because she wants to support her husband, where May's like, I'm basically his mother, so I can point that out to him, kind of.
I disagree with that. I more of the
which is why
I described it, to be honest.
I believe that's why she doesn't know the secret now. Because everybody's been, like, you read reviews, you talk to people, especially after issue 18, where after she's like, okay, I'm cool now with you after Superior because you saved me and my husband's life from the Black Cat. Why doesn't he take off the mask and say, Aunt May, I'm Spider-Man? And because she was obviously in the GMS era, and I bring this up in my GMS articles that I got on the website now, she's totally cool with Peter being Spider-Man and won't die of a heart attack if she found out the secret. But he doesn't tell her no more, and it's mostly because Marvel writers want that old Aunt May back. But I almost lost my train of thought. And that's why. But I think the in-story reason why he doesn't do that is because he thinks back to this moment in Civil War, and he's like, Aunt May, by bringing this up, had me demasked, and if she doesn't know I'm Spider-Man, she's obviously, if something like this ever happens again, she won't tell me, Peter, the best thing to do is to take off the mask. If she doesn't know I'm Spider-Man, she can't tell me that. Like, I think that's what he's thinking. To protect my secret identity from having another Civil War, it's best for me not to tell her.
That is, I've never really thought of that theory when thinking about the current era of Spider-Man and thinking about how Aunt May doesn't know. I mean, obviously we know that the real reason is that because that the creators don't want Aunt May to know. They don't think it's right for her character. And I'm not saying that. I'm pretty sure that was outlined in Tom Brevoort's official Brand New Day manifesto that was published.
Marvel always had that stance with Aunt May. Like, if you read like from issue 300 to 400, once Peter gets married and she dies in 400, it's like a slow burn from her being the doting aunt to being the doting, smothering aunt, all the way to when she dies and she knows the secret and she's calm about it and she's actually a good character where you mourn her death. They bring her back with the reboot, and then she's like, oh, Spider-Man's a menace, and the Green Goblin's a menace, and they're menaces because of that damn rap music. Damn that rap music. They're why they're menaces. It was like, they were like, see, we got our Aunt May back. That's the way she should be written, the way I remember her from the 60s and 70s. And ironic enough, GMS comes in. He does the same thing they kind of that Diamantidis and Michelini were building up to, leading up with Clone Saga and her death in 400. They were building up to what basically Aunt May was back to the point of where she was, where she died in 400, and GMS had her there, and even go steps beyond that, only for once again Marvel to step in with a reboot and go, see, 1960, 70 Aunt May, that's how we had her, so that's how you're gonna have her.
And it is the unfortunate. I don't know if we can call it stigma of the current era to sort of retread what was done in the early days of Spider-Man with obviously with the Aunt May stuff, with Peter Parker living with Aunt May at the beginning of Brand New Day of him not having a job, with all of that stuff, and it is sort of a stigma of the current Spider-Man books, and I think that is a classic example of it. Now, one thing, I mean, it's really the discussion that I think both of us have to have right now is the idea of Peter Parker unmasking. Is it something that he would ever do under any circumstances willingly? Is it something that, given the right push, I guess we could call it, given the right reasons, and I say quote-unquote right reasons as reasons that maybe would lead him to it, would he ever willingly take off the mask?
Well, this is coming from somebody who walked into those comic shops in 2006, 2007 when Civil War was happening and were buying these issues. I was that guy. I was there. And when that news broke, I think it was like Newsarama, like a day before the issue came up, because people were still wondering, is he going to demask or is it a trick and he's going to join? Is this where he's going to flip-flop sides? Is he going to take off the mask halfway and say no and start fighting Tony? Like, what's going to happen? Like, nobody knew. And then Newsarama said, here's the spread of him without the mask and going, buy this comic now, Spider-Man takes off his mask. I was actually kind of positive about it at the time because I'm thinking it leads into a lot of great stories. You get which we kind of got and kind of didn't get depending on what character it was. You got Norman's point of view of, oh my god, I used to have this secret I could torture him over, and now that's gone. My power over him and revealing the secret is gone. You had Kingpin and other mobster villains that would be ready to take him and his family out. You had other villains that were like, holy shit, all this time was a teenager who was taking me out. I was getting my ass kicked by a 15-year-old. And obviously Flash was a big one I wanted to see the reaction, because Flash is the biggest Spider-Man fan and Peter Parker's greatest nemesis in the college days. The guy who he was worshiping was the guy who he was giving wedgies to and stuffing in lockers. Like, that was going to be somebody's opinion. Betty I wanted to see, because she blamed Spider-Man for the death of her father. Like, there was, like, so much that you could have done with a Peter Parker en masse. And Jonah, obviously, with the whole suing. That was another big one, like, oh, how's Jonah going to react? And you could kind of finally get these stories where it's like that you only dreamed of. Well, Peter, you brought up. I wonder how Aunt May would react if she ever saw something about the mask. I wonder how Flash Thompson and all these kids would react if I ever took off the mask and told them that the kid who they're making fun of is really Spider-Man. Like, he has talked about this, and this is something fans have wondered. Well, what if this person found out? Why hasn't this person ever found out? And you got a lot of build-up for these great stories, but then you catapult a year and a half later because Civil War had a lot of delays, so that really affected all the tie-in books. So this run of Amazing should have, like, I believe One More Day should have began, like they said, in like summer, should have been Brand New Day, but it ended up being like the next winter. And so this story at first, but now that you know the truth, that pretty much the Spider-Man writers were just told, fuck it, do whatever you want because we're going to reboot anyways. So it's kind of like they weren't building up anything for these stories. They're like, yeah, we can do these if we want, but at the same time, we're going to cosmic reboot in a few months, so it doesn't even matter if we even touch those stories.
But do you think it was in character for Peter to ever take off the mask willingly?
This is the hard part because literally over the years I've gone back and forth when discussions of Civil War has come up. There's times where I take the stance of yes because it's a responsible thing to do and Peter would do it and it's probably what Uncle Ben would have told him to do. And that's where I think Aunt May's point of view is, that she's basically the film for Uncle Ben because they both would have told him, Peter, it's a responsible thing. You're supposed to protect the law. This is the law. And so I think in those point of views he would, but we have seen over the years how overprotected Peter gets about the secret identity. So it's kind of out of character, but at the same time it's not. It's like a really weird thing with dealing with this, let's just say.
Because I'm very much in the same boat as you, as like, I'm almost kind of mixed on it, but in all honesty, I do sort of lean towards it being more out of character. Because, I mean, here is the thing. I do believe that Peter could be influenced and pushed by the words of Aunt May and her advice. I do believe that would have a significant effect on his viewing of it and his thought process behind it. But I also believe that I just kind of believe that Peter Parker knows the repercussions of what that would do. I think he knows the consequence. I think he knows the consequences of what taking off the mask would be. I think he knows exactly what that would entail, and I think he knows how much more responsibility he would have. He would wonder to himself, can I handle all of this? Would I be able to keep my family safe? And it just and that point is even brought up, and I believe it's Amazing 533. He says to Tony Stark, if any harm falls to them, I'm going to come after you.
Well, she does in One More Day. Give him credit. He does keep his promise.
Yeah, it's like, if any harm comes to my family because of what you pushed me to do, I'm going to come after you. And I will say that was kind of badass. But I think he would realize all of those things because, I mean, like you said, he's always been so obsessive about his secret identity. And he's never and something that I've thought about with this topic is like, he would take off the mask if it was what Aunt May wanted him to do. But for how many years did he operate as Spider-Man thinking to himself that it wouldn't be what Aunt May would want? So...
Well, it's what you think and what you know. He thought for all those years that Aunt May would die of a heart attack because she hates Spider-Man. But now that he knows that that's not what's going to happen. He now knows what she would want him to do. Where if he would have never asked her during Civil War, like if Civil War, she never found out the secret when Civil War happened, I think Peter would have been like, no, because I can't imagine what would happen to my Aunt May if she told me and took off the mask. But since she does know, and she does know what her opinion would be, and she'd be like, Peter, I want people to worship you as the hero you are.
And I understand that, but I also do think that Peter's solid stance during all of those prior years before Amazing Spider-Man Volume 2 with JMS's run, I really do think that he was so solid in his thought that, Aunt May would not approve of this, that it was, I mean, maybe this doesn't make any sense, but to him those thoughts were pretty much set in stone fact in his mind that maybe he didn't have any official confirmation about it, but it was something that he thought that he just knew and he just took them as fact. So that's why I'm kind of skeptical on that almost, because it's just I really don't think that he would have taken off the mask willingly, because he knows the repercussions of that. He knows what would come of that, and it's even obviously it's proven in later issues, and he spent 500 plus issues, with so many more counting the satellite titles and all of the secondary and tertiary and however many books that Spider-Man has appeared in where he's worried about his secret identity. He spent so many issues dealing with the problem, not only in dialogues with Mary Jane and all of that with the villains who know him, such as Norman Osborn, Eddie Brock, people like that, but also internally, dealing with the struggle himself. And that has been such a core part of Spider history. And I really don't think he would turn on such such a drastic dime in just one issue. It doesn't really come off that way to me.
Well, if you read the other issues of Amazing and New Avengers and Iron Man and stuff like that, like I don't think Iron Man really touched upon it because Iron Man was really the solo episode, but the solo book where he didn't really have Peter in it at all. Like Peter didn't even get brought up, his relationship with Peter, until like the new volume started with Fraction. Like right before Secret Invasion, it's like, should we wrap up this whole Peter and Tony stuff that's been hanging here since Civil War? Yeah, let's wrap it up in one issue before we start our Secret Invasion tie-ins. But that's one of the things is where I believe that if you read those books, Peter making the choice, you understand it, because he sees Tony as his father figure. He's finally an Avenger. He's finally getting what he always wanted, and the Civil War Restoration Act is kind of ruining that. So he's like, I got to be on Tony's side because he's been there for me. He gave me and my aunt and May a house to live in since that nutso second Molten Man. I think Chris, what was his name? Like Chris something or whatever. But what are the guys? Charlie.
I think it's Chart.
Oh, because his last name is my friend Chris's last name, so that's why I keep on thinking it's Chris.
Charlie Whiterman?
Yeah, that's my friend Chris has that last name. So I always get those names confused when I talk about that. The second Multiman, fuck it. His house got burned down. Tony did a lot of shit for him. Like, he went to back for him, not only to the Bugle, but also to the tabloids, when the tabloids came after Spider-Man. He's the one. Tony didn't have to do that, but there was like an issue of Amazing where Mary Jane's going into the Avenger Tower, and the married supermodel wife of Peter Parker is going inside Avenger Tower. She's probably one of the bimbos Tony starts banging by TMZ and the Gossip magazine, and Tony came right out saying, he works for me. He's my employee. He's working with me as official. I think it was like either official photographer for the Avengers or science, kind of thing for the company or what. It was something like that where he goes, his house burned down and I'm his boss and I was being nice by letting him and his wife live there. He didn't want to make a big news story out of it, so that's why they were sneaking into the building. It had nothing to do with anything quiet.
I did read that story, and that was a very good moment. I did read that story. It was a very good moment for them because I do remember that.
And then it's one of the reasons why even post, when you get to the Heroic Age and the Avenger reboots that Bendis did, and he was a member of the Avengers, why you could have Spider-Man walking around the building without a mask, and he's out of suit and taking photos of them because they just like, oh, it's Peter Parker, he works for Tony, or oh, he's their official photographer. Like there was an excuse for why Peter Parker could walk around without a mask in Avengers Tower with the Avengers because he's working with them. He's not Spider-Man, but he's just somebody working with them.
And I mean, getting back onto the topic of would Spider-Man unmask willingly, it's just I think it's something that you and I are probably going to have to agree to disagree on.
I don't really know because I don't really know about that since we both took the stance of in some ways yes and in some ways no.
I take more of the stance of no. I mean, I do. You can make a valid argument for either side. I will admit that. You can make a valid.
Because, like, personally, I'll try to interrupt you. I'm just going to try to clarify here. Personally, would I have Peter take, the taking out the mask? No, but I can see the story reasons why he did it and what they wanted him to do it. Like, I can see by the build-up by why it's a logical thing for him to do it. But at the same time, personally, no, I would have wrote that he would have been, like, halfway taking out the mask, half-second thoughts, and then, like, what's one way saying, Tony, I can't do it, or something like that.
or just web shooting Tony Stark in the face.
Well, I can't see that because then that's too much of a gotcha. I'm really capsized the whole time. It would have been like a ha ha ha, where it's kind of like
Yeah,
one of it. He has to think about it and he doesn't show up or whatever. Like Tony's
that
like,
would.
"You're Spider-Man," and he doesn't show it and he web swing away. Spider-Man. Like, I
Yeah,
could have called that more than gotcha. Web swing.
yeah, he would not just web shoot Tony Stark in the face, but
He has too much respect for Tony. I think even if he decided not to be on Tony's side, he wouldn't have done that.
yeah, until about 3 issues later. So
Well, that's because of everything that built up. I mean, initially he wouldn't have just done that.
yeah, obviously. But then you get to Amazing Spider-Man Volume 3 where he's punching Captain America in the face for no reason. But we're not going to talk about that right now.
Well, can I bring up one thing since we're on the whole Tony Stark and the unmasking and everything? Because this is a point I've been wanting to bring up for a couple of weeks now when I've been rereading the old issues of Amazing and whatnot for the website, for my reviews. If you don't mind me doing this for a second. Do you think that Tony should find out the secret? Because I found like it was one of the dumbest things, especially in the post-Secret Invasion, and definitely after Superior with him saying, guys, it wasn't me, it was out on my body. And there's a line by Iron Man who says, well, I could have solved the problem, but you guys wouldn't tell me his secret because he doesn't trust me no more since Civil War. Do you think that Peter should have unmasked to Tony, or Tony should have found out somehow again? Because it's kind of weird. He's the only Avenger who doesn't know when Peter was an Avenger.
It's a bit of a double-edged sword. I mean, I understand the points you're making, but at the same time, I can kind of understand from an in-universe perspective, because obviously Peter remembers Civil War. That wasn't wiped away by one more day.
Tony remembers it too. He doesn't remember that A, Peter was married, and B, who was the face he was talking to.
Yeah, because of the whole freaking psychic mind block idea.
But that brings up another thing, is that Carly found out because the second the mind block was undone by Peter going on national TV. See, I got spider powers too by Spider Island, and that was the MacGuffin. They have the secret identity out there again. And Carly, and I think Doc Ock too, and even Norman, they used their brains and actually thought about it. You're telling me Tony hasn't thought about, what's Spider-Man's secret identity now that the Spider Island thing's over? I mean, I knew I used to remember it, but why can't I remember now? Okay, there was this employee that used to work there, Peter Parker with us, but why was Parker has a connection to Spider-Man? Spider-Man. Peter Parker, Spider-Man! Like, why hasn't nothing ever like that even happened?
Norman doesn't know the secret. Norman doesn't know his secret identity. No, Norman does not know.
That was the whole point. He wanted an Octon mask. Was that I know you're in his body, I just don't know who he is. Yeah, fuck it, I forgot about that.
Yeah, Norman does not know, and I think Doc Ock only found out because he traded brains with the guy.
I mean, that's it. But Carly did. Carly thought about it, remember? I thought she thought about it.
Yeah, Carly figured it out after the whole speech in, I believe it was 668, where he jumps up on the lamppost and says, I'm Peter Parker, I have spider powers, just like all these other people during the events of Spider Island, except he actually had superpowers from 10 years ago.
I love that how he's like, hey, how did Carly find out? You told me this mind wap thing was going to make sure that nobody could find out. And he tells Peter pretty much, dude, you told everybody in the city that you have spider powers. But I didn't say I was Spider-Man. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Doctor Strange is like, you kind of shot yourself in the foot there. He's like, you kind of...
spider powers. You didn't want people to remember that you had spider powers. It's null and void, Peter. I don't make the rules.
Well, technically he did, but...
Well, not really. He passes the spell, but he's not the one who wrote the rules about how the spell works.
Yeah, whatever. But, so, needless to say, Peter Parker takes off the mask. He says, I am Spider-Man. My name is Peter Parker. I've been Spider-Man since I was 15 years old. You get a great scene between between Jonah and Robbie, where Jonah just says, and Jonah's just full of it. I mean, what Jonah does not live on a little place I like to call Earth. He really doesn't. But Jonah's like, Peter was the last straight guy in the world. and when I say straight guy, I mean he was the last honest guy in the world.
Yeah,
He was the last good guy.
He was the last guy he would have thought was Spider-Man.
And now, I find out that he's Spider-Man, that he was probably laughing at me all those years, that I was buying pictures from him.
Which, to be fair,
it's just like, yeah, Peter was definitely laughing at him a lot.
He was like, I wonder what he would do here.
Like,
oh, he was selling the photos of Spider-Man.
Yeah, Peter was laughing at him. Jonah was not wrong about that. But it's like, of course, in typical Jonah fashion, he's like, that guy was like a son to me. I was like, Jonah, shut up.
Well,
You were so full of it.
He always did like in the marriage issue of Annual 21, he even says that too, as Peter, you're like a son to me. Like, he did kind of, in a weird way, it was Jonah tough love kind of way, but he did kind of think of Peter as a son.
Which, and then of course, 13 issues later, besides all, in spite of all of that, Peter Parker storms into the Daily Bugle and demands a check from Jonah, even when Jonah's about to lose the Daily Bugle. Oh, wait, sorry, I'm not supposed to talk about that. That's Brand New Day. Yeah, well, we've actually talked about that story. So that's a great scene between Jonah and Robbie, because even if Jonah is full of it, you just see how the unmasking affects him. And that's just something I love about Amazing Spider-Man 533 is, like, even though I don't like the unmasking very much, the reactions from the various supporting cast members and the various villains are very, very good, and they're very powerful. I love seeing Jonah's reaction, and I love seeing the reaction from the villains, like the Vulture and all of them. I love seeing their reactions. It's like, well, nice job, Spider-Man. Now you've basically pulled the Tony Stark in Iron Man 3. We're going to come after you. You get...
John? Hello? Hello? Anybody home? I'm making a fuck up to it. John, are you there? Yeah. If we're still live, people, I'm sorry about this. I'm going to see what's going on with John. I'm apologizing to you. I'm on technical difficulties. Sorry, people. I'm talking to Jonathan right now. He's got a complete loss of interconnection. He's trying to get it back, and I guess if we can, we'll see if we got to reschedule this episode. We're trying to figure this out right now. Again, apologies. John's trying to get it back right now, and and Jan says hi. He's studying for finals, and he's trying to talk hi to us while we're trying to figure out this problem. So Jan says hi. But as soon as we get the show back on, guys, we'll try to get it to work again. Let's see what's going on here. John's about to message me right now about if you can get back on or not.
So I apologize for that little delay there. That's gonna get edited out.
Yeah,
Yes,
I try
I
to keep
apologize.
I tried to keep the peace. I'm just telling you that right now. Like I apologize to people if I was very quiet during this, but because I'm trying to get hold of John. Because I don't want to step on your toes when you get back. Because I know I hate that when AGR, when I lose connection, I get back and it's like I completely lost my train of thought with the show. So I'm like, I'm just gonna keep on trying to tell people, and I'm like, Jan says hi. Jan's studying for finals.
Yeah, I apologize for that right now. My Wi-Fi just completely dropped. Um, so I apologize for that right now. But I believe we were talking about Amazing Spider-Man number 533. And we were talking about oh, sorry, that is my iPad. I just dropped my iPad right there.
But when
We
we
were
were waiting
talking
on
about
the
the react.
I was able to find this in one of my alarm boxes I got right here real quickly. Because my Iron Man ones are closer than most of my old Spider-Mans because there's a lot more old Spider-Man than there is this. And this is the issue I'm talking about that actually finally dealt with the post Brain Date, and it's actually a pretty good issue that deals with Tony and Peter, and he even brings it up to Peter in this issue. Why don't you take off your mask to me again? Because pretty much the world's going to hell anyway. Norman's controlling the planet, and Peter goes, "I just can't do it, Tony. I can't risk it. I know the cost." So at least they tried to deal with it.
And I will talk about various reactions from different supporting characters, different villains, and I will say I did like how obviously I liked how Jonah reacted. I like how villains like the Vulture and everyone reacted because obviously it does get to the point of you've just gone all Iron Man 3 on us. We know your secret identity, and now we're going to come after you. And I really do like the scene of Peter throwing up in the bathroom because he's like, oh my gosh, what did I just do? And I do like that underlying current.
That's fear setting into him, like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god.
Yeah, and I do like kind of like the underlying tone and current throughout Peter's internal monologue and his internal thoughts of how he's like, what have I just done? What are the consequences going to be? How is this going to affect everyone? And obviously that shows when he says, Tony, if my family gets hurt because of this, there's going to be hell to pay.
You're dead.
So, I mean, I do like the issue of Amazing Spider-Man number 533. I think it does deal with a lot of interesting problems and interesting perspectives. And it's an interesting look into how a lot of different characters, Peter Parker included, are reacting to the issue. I mean, James, how do you feel about it?
I think it's a pretty good reaction to everybody that they're having about it. Like I said, there's stuff that fans have been wondering for years. Like, how would Jonah react? How would Betty react? How would Flash react? Like, Flash was the big one I always wanted to see because I was a big fan of the. At the time, I was starting to pick up the Essentials, so I was really starting to see the Flash and Peter rivalry of the nerd and Peter and their friendship evolve over the years. So having Peter finally Flash find out, and that shocking disbelief of, holy crap, this ain't real, it's some trick, Peter's just pretending to be it so that way Spidey can get away from the law. And then finally, back in Black, he finds out that it is, the truth that Peter is Spider-Man by Peter dodging a dodgeball. It was weird. It's like, you dodged a dodgeball. I know you are Spider-Man.
Yes, because dodging a dodgeball is not the total point of that.
Granted, he did a backflip and kicked it back at him and said my spider sense is tingling, so still.
Yes, because the point of dodgeball is not to dodge the ball. Yeah, so as we move away from Amazing Spider-Man 533, let me pull my notes back up here. Getting a little discombobulated. But I really do like in Amazing Spider-Man 534 as we move towards that issue. Peter once again doubts that his choice is good, that he's made the right decision. He's doubting that a lot, and really in Amazing Spider-Man 534, that's really where he first comes into conflict with Captain America and his quote-unquote liberal forces with those in opposition to the Registration Act. Because as Captain America will explain in a later issue, he doesn't believe that the law is right, and he believes that what's right must always if a law is not right, then something must be done about it. And it must be opposed and all that stuff.
That's always one of the
So Peter,
that is one of the cool things about Civil War is that people saw Cap as a traitor. But when you think about it, Cap's not. He's doing something no different than what George Washington did. He rebelled against laws that he thought were unjust.
Exactly. I mean, it's like people. I mean, I almost kind of maybe this is just because it's a topic that a lot of people around me have been researching, especially in my the English class that I just finished. But Edward Snowden with the NSA government surveillance document leaking. He wasn't trying to harm the United States. He was trying to fight back against laws that he felt were unjust. And that is basically the objective reasoning that has been officially given as to why he did it. Whether or not you agree with what he did, whether or not you think what he did was just, or any of the methods that he used to disclose the information, that's basically what he was doing. Now, I'm not comparing Edward Snowden to George Washington. I believe there's a big difference there, but that's just kind of what the situation.
Than somebody fleeing to another country with documents, that are government secrets, and Captain America going, I don't like this law. I'm gonna go punch Iron Man now.
But it's kind of what it reminds me of. Maybe that's a stupid analogy.
It's somebody rebelling against the government, whether you agree with it or don't agree with it. It's somebody rebelling against the government.
Exactly. And that's basically what it is. And the main point of Amazing 534 that I absolutely love, I do absolutely love this, is when Captain America throws his shield at Spider-Man, and Spider-Man says, "That is the symbol of America that was just thrown at me." The face of our country, that man just attacked me because. And that's where Peter really starts to set in that, maybe he's wrong.
It's one of the things that I always felt like with The Dark Knight Returns, definitely The Dark Knight Returns with Batman, is that they got wrong was where if DC ever had their own Resurrection Act in Civil War, I always kind of felt that Batman would have been on the side of the law because Batman's law is law. And Superman's more, truth, justice, and, protecting everybody. So I always felt like that Civil War is the way Dark Knight Returns should have been. Instead of Superman being the government pawn while Batman's the guy rebelled against the system because he's the goddamn Batman. It should have been the reverse, I felt like. I felt it should have been Superman like, hey, I don't agree with this unjust law. I protect everybody, superhero or no superpowers. I'm not going to do it. Kind of like what Sentry did, ironically enough, in this book, where it's kind of like, I'm staying out of this. And Batman would have been like, no, it's the law, Clark. You got to obey the law. And that's kind of like what you get with this. You kind of get the American symbol is up against what he feels is anti-American, but he's not on the side of what the American government wants. It's kind of weird that he's against the government, but he is the government, kind of.
He's the figurehead of the government, kind of.
Yeah.
But so basically, that's where Peter really starts to sort of. It's where he really starts to have serious doubts about whether or not he's really on the right side, whether or not what he's doing is really just, and whether or not it is the right thing to do. And I really do like that moment because it feels more in character for Peter Parker to me. I mean, as much as I don't agree with what he's done, and this is a point that I think we kind of skipped over. Would Peter Parker tell Tony Stark to go shove it if he felt that, if he really honestly felt that he couldn't go along with what Tony was doing because he knew it was wrong? Do we think that would be? Do you think?
Well, he kind of touches upon that. He's like telling Mary Jane and Aunt May, we should get out of here. Like he's constantly saying we should get out of here. I think that's what he would have done. Like I said, if Tony would have been standing there saying, Spider-Man! Spider-Man! Peter, where the hell are you? Spider-Man! Peter probably would have bolted. Tony would have revealed the secret by saying, fuck it, he's Spider-Man's Peter Parker, probably. Whether that be in character or not in character. But still, he would have said, whatever. But, he would have done that, and Peter would have took him and Mary Jane and would have gone to Canada. He became Canada's greatest superhero. Next to Wolverine.
Yes. And I think that, Peter Parker definitely is a man of his word, and he would feel guilty. I mean, whether or not he was in the right or not, I think he would feel guilty about telling Stark to go shove it. But it is another reason that I think he wouldn't have taken off the mask, because I think in his heart he knew that Tony was wrong in forcing him in. Okay, he didn't force him to do it, but I mean, he basically did.
It's to set up one more day. Like the moment he unmasks it, he makes that decision. That's Marvel steamrolling to one more day. Like literally, that's the jumping on point. Some people say when they got married inside you is the jumping on point to what led to one more day. But this is where it began, because literally he's thinking I made the worst decision of my life. He made his first deal with the devil, so he's willing to make a second deal, which is Mephisto. Kinda. It's like that's the way I look at it. Like the minute he took off the mask, this is part one of One More Day. Because from this point on, he's regretting the decision, which leads them to, I gotta do whatever it takes to save my aunt. Oh, and get my cigar identity back.
And that is the big. I mean, obviously, excuse me. Obviously, it is a lead up to One More Day. It obviously is. And having Peter Parker go against Tony Stark as he eventually does, it's something that comes a bit too late. But as we move into that, I believe it is Amazing Spider-Man 535, where they finally confront, where Tony finally takes Peter to the negative zone, the prison that basically acts as the catalyst for Peter to switch sides. And what Peter basically decides to do after, well, okay, let me slow down, because I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here, because a lot of things happen up in this head here. It never stops. As Tony takes Peter to the negative zone prison, and Tony explains to him, how it works, what the inmates do, and how long they're there for. And Peter Parker basically says, so any superheroes who don't register are here for the rest of their life? And Tony says, until they register. If they choose to register, they can come out. If they don't, they don't. And Peter basically says, okay, that's the breaking point for me.
Yeah.
And so that's where he pulls Mary Jane and Aunt May aside, and he says, I made a mistake. I have to take this guy out. In the middle of Avengers Tower, was not a great plan.
Well, the one
because Iron Man immediately.
The heroes that are in that prison, did you recognize who they were? They're the web slingers. They're the heroes that Peter gave. He's basically, those are the heroes back in the 90s when Peter did a stint where Spider-Man the heat was on him for the murder of Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy when Norman came back. When the heat was really on getting Spider-Man, he to throw people off his trail, he became 4 different other heroes. And then after that arc, he gave 4 super kids pretty much those suits that had similar power sets to these heroes and said, go have fun with them. And those heroes are the ones that are being the web slingers were their name. That was their group name, the web slingers. And that was them in the jail. So Peter's seeing, oh my God, I pretty much made these kids, and Tony's arresting them, so it's obvious of why they were there.
Yeah, the storyline James is referencing there with the different identities Peter adopted 4 different identities during sort of a manhunt for Spider-Man after Norman Osborn dug up basically brought BS accusations, and Spider-Man was not in the public favor at that point. So during a storyline in the 90s entitled Identity Crisis, Peter Parker developed 4 different identities for himself so that he continued to be a superhero but not be Spider-Man. So that's the storyline James is referencing
and
there.
to throw off people sent on Peter Parker being Spider-Man.
Exactly. So, yes, so he sees that, and that's basically his tipping point. Was this was this a good catalyst for Peter's side switch? Was it logical for this to be the breaking point for him?
No, because Civil War gave a better explanation in the actual book. There was a hero, Blake Foster, who was Goliath, and Ben Foster, and he got killed by a 4 clone created by Tony, Pym, and Reed. And they were remorseless. They're like, hey, it's the law. We need 4 on our side. So we created a clone. We don't care. And there's other heroes that are like, hey, are we on the right side here? And Peter's one of them, like, we're killing each other now. And they don't care. I'm starting to double think what side I'm on. I'm telling you guys this honestly. We're in Amazing. You got the negative zone thing, which, granted, it ties into what what happened in Civil War with Peter going, they're kind of cold about one of our friends being dead. And here they are being cold again about throwing people in jail. So that kind of ties in. But the one where I call BS is, like, I don't know if it was this issue or the issue before, where Tony says, Peter, can you tell us how many unregistered heroes are in this area with your spider sense? And he's like, how does Tony? Is he keeping spies on me? Nobody but Mary Jane and Aunt May knows about the spider sense. And it's like, you, what? How many times have you said out loud over the years, my spider sense is tingling?
I was like, I'm pretty sure more people know about that.
Chameleon knew about it even before Peter knew about it. He's like, what's this strange tingle sensation going on in my brain? And it was Chameleon trying to contact him through his spider sense.
That was in the first issue of Amazing Spider-Man.
People know. So they don't know who you are, but they know you have a spider sense. But what tips him off is Tony saying, Peter, use your spider sense to detect how many unregistered heroes or how many missiles are being fired at us. And Peter's like, oh my god, Tony must be keeping spies on me. How does he know about my spider sense? Nobody but Aunt May and Uncle Ben know about my spider sense. Are you fucking kidding me right now?
So there's that, and
it's the setup that he doesn't trust Tony no more. I get it, but at least give a legit reason why.
The idea of it's not so much a supervillain prison as it is a superhero prison. The idea that he would not like that idea, I understand that he wouldn't like that idea, and I understand.
Well, I can see Peter's point again with it too. Well, I can actually go into my point about it. Peter has a point. He goes, basically, what you're telling me, let's say another kid gets bit by a radioactive, or stung by a radioactive bee and becomes Bee-Man. Like, I know it's a dumb plot for a superhero, but let's face it, Spider-Man back in '62 was a dumb plot, probably. I mean, to the point they Marvel didn't even want him, Stanley, to do the book. So let's just say that. And there was another hero that came out at the same time, Ant-Man, so whatever. But let's say, Peter's thinking, the way I think about it, let's say a kid gets stung by a radioactive bee and gets powers. Does the power responsibility, doesn't become a supervillain, but decides, hey, I got all the powers of a bee. I don't know why, but he has all the powers of a bee. I'm not going to use these powers. I just want to be average Joe. I just want to be me. I'm just never going to use these powers. Maybe I'll use them every once in a while when I need to, but no, I'm not going to use them. Is Tony going to say, fuck that, you're going in jail? But I'm not using my powers. Fuck that, you're in jail until you register. But I don't want to be a superhero. Fuck that, get in the cell. Like, that's how I can see Peter's point of view is.
And I completely agree with that. I mean, I think the idea of the superhero prison being kind of Peter's catalyst for switching sides, it is a bit shaky, I will admit that. My problems with his side switch, I mean, the problems with his side switch is not really the idea, more of the execution behind it, because of what he does.
I felt like the way the Restoration Act would have worked, instead of the heroes coming after each other, and that's being the catalyst of why people chose sides, is you're trying to arrest our friends or you're trying to arrest me for not registering. They should have had to be more of a thing of, okay, if you're registered, you're an illegal hero by the government. You get paid, you get benefits, you get health care, you get all that stuff. If you don't register, you're on your own. If you blow up a city like what happened with Stanford, that's your fault. If a cop, not a superhero, if a cop arrests you for vigilantism, we're not bailing you out. Probably would have still pissed people off, but it wouldn't have caused a civil war with the Marvel heroes.
And The superhero prison.
It literally comes down to superhero could save a cat from a tree, and he's in jail for life because of it.
That's what it does come down to, and I agree with Peter on the superhero prison. I do agree with him on that. Now, my big problem here with what Peter does is how he decides to switch sides. I really don't think Peter Parker would ever take his family on the run like that.
Well,
I really don't think he...
He does kind of bring up, if you guys want to stay back in the mansion, I'm not going to stop you. And they do choose, no, Peter,
that
you're
is
we stay with you. Which, again, it sets up Brand New Day because it's like, now they get the consequences because Mary Jane and Aunt May said, Peter, we're going with you. We're leaving the security of the home. Peter forced them to, kind of pushed them to leave, but they also volunteered. So now Aunt May doesn't know the secret no more, and Mary Jane's a bitch for taking the deal. Ha ha. It's like, that's what it feels like at times. Like that was the whole point, to justify, see, they forced him. So he took them out on the run, and now all the consequences happen. It's not Peter's fault or Mephisto's fault. It's because it's needed to happen.
That is true. And when I say that's true, I mean talking about how, they did try to, they did kind of want to go with him. That is true. I believe that happens in Amazing Spider-Man number 536. When Peter asks, MJ, you're a pretty well-known face, and people know that you're married to me. If people recognize you, you're going to get arrested. And she's like, yeah, well, there are ways to make sure that guys don't pay attention to your face. And then she starts unbuttoning her shirt.
Okay, that's just classic comic book sex sells. I'm sorry.
I know.
I mean, there is a alternative cover. I mean, look at Renew Your Vows. There's the one cover that is obviously, him and the daughter and Mary Jane, and it's kind of a callback to the wedding issue with the heart in the background and everything. Renew Your Vows. And then there's another one where it's like Mary Jane showing a little bit of butt cheek while she's sitting on the couch, and Peter all handsomely is hugging her. And I mean, it's obvious. Like Campbell's art, whenever he draws, there's more than a coincidence. The fact that there's Mary Jane or Black Cat or Gwen looking kind of sexy in it. Let's just say that.
Yeah. So Peter takes them on the run, and I do agree that they did kind of go and help him, but I just don't think I don't think it would happen. I think he would have gone to greater lengths than just hiding them in a hotel room or a motel room. Excuse me.
He would have took them out of the country.
I think he would have gone to greater lengths than he did.
Like again, granted, he does say, "I want to take you guys out of the country, take you guys far away from here as possible. I gotta stay back because I gotta stop this law, but I want to send you guys from far away as possible." So, granted, he does bring that up, but again, it's all just there to justify one more day.
And it leads to poor characterization and poor writing, I think, in my opinion. I'm not a big fan of how that worked. And really, I mean,
he sent them when one in Marvel Knights, the first arc, when one supervillain found out his secret identity, he sent both. Oh, and May got kidnapped, but he sent Mary Jane away. He said, "Go be with your sister in Pittsburgh. Go somewhere else. Don't be here." Civil War, he brings it up one time, and she's like, "No, I'm not going." Okay. Because we need Mary Jane for the deal with Mephisto. He can't take the deal if she's not there, because if she's not there, we can't blame it on her.
And obviously the ulterior motive of...
That's all it is. It's to set up why Mary Jane is in New York for one more day.
And it leads to poor characterizations and ultimately poor writing. And that is a major flaw in the storytelling. And it's where Civil War really starts to... I mean, I was not a big fan of the unmasking. I was never in support of it. This is where Civil War really starts to lose me. I mean, as much as I did... as much as I did enjoy the reactions of the various supporting cast members to the unmasking, and as much as I did enjoy Peter sort of doubting his decision, I was never in support of the unmasking, and I really don't like the fugitive aspect of him taking his family on the run like this, where I do acknowledge that they did want to go with him. I do acknowledge that. I do not disagree with that. But I think he would have gone to greater lengths to protect them.
Well, it's like you said, like I personally agree that it was a good idea because, like I said, the things, and other than One More Day, if they would have had another ending, there was always a way out for Peter's secret to become his secret again. Not a psychic mind block, not a deal with Mephisto. Dan Slott, ironically enough, wrote the story, and he was able to write it because nobody gave a crap, and he outright said, I was thinking about, okay, One More Day, but I have to at least give a reason why, even if One More Day doesn't happen, how he can people not know his secret. He goes, and he wrote an issue, I think it was Avengers Initiative, was that it? Where it was an arc where the government, with the Registration Act, using Peter's files, made clones. I think it wasn't it. They made clones of him and new Scarlet Spiders using Iron Spider suits. And at the end of the arc, Jonah prints in the paper, I think I'm wrong. Maybe Peter's not Spider-Man. Maybe Peter just wore the Iron Spider suit that can mimic Spider-Man's powers, as we saw with these other Iron Spiders running around. Maybe he just wore that suit and he tricked us so that way we could think that Spider-Man unmasked in the Civil War. Maybe he just did it for Tony because maybe he's not really Spider-Man. Like, they actually set up a story where logically they could have a few years later after telling the story to have it where, oh, people in New York doesn't think Peter Parker's Spider-Man because the Iron Spider suit can mimic his powers. Granted, it's a little bit loose, but at least you can go with it. Not deal with Mephisto or my wife.
I actually never read that story, so that's interesting that you bring that up. And
he even brought it up when he did an interview with the Crawl Space podcast. Like, he did an interview with them like around the time of Big Time, where he said that was one of the things he wanted to do when he found he was going to be a writer, and he first found out about Brand New Day. That was pretty much it. Was like, he said, well, he had his own idea of how he would have done it, and that was it. And so, because nobody cared, because literally, if you were a Spider-Man book or you were a book wanting to deal with Spider-Man, they didn't care. We're cosmic rebooting. Do whatever you want with the character. So he was able to get away with that arc where basically it was setting up like, and it was also kind of like a red herring. Oh, is that how his secret's not going to be known again for Brand New Day? And it's like, nope, it was Mephisto.
So, Peter officially switches sides. He meets up with Captain America, and Captain America gives the whole speech about, how it's every American's duty to do what is right, even if it is not by the law. And Peter agrees with that, and he says, it's fine. It's good to finally be on the right side again. And so that leads into the end of Civil War, or at least the big end of the Civil War arc, in Amazing Spider-Man 538, which features the final fight that's highly prominent in Civil War #7 of the miniseries, the main Civil War miniseries. And for those of you who actually have not,
and it's one of the reasons why I don't agree with Civil War, because that fight is really brutal. Where I get it, you're all anti this law or pro this law, but you got like members of the Fantastic Four who are willing to kill people who they say are their family, who they would never hurt.
And then Civil War #7. For those of you who have actually not read it, Civil War basically ends because Captain America looks around him and sees exactly what James is saying. We're killing each other. Civilians are getting hurt. We're just fighting to fight at this point. And so Captain America
flip-flops. And you could tell, like, this is right when they got, okay, what we're going to do post-Civil War down. Because once they realize, okay, Iron Man's going to be Director of S.H.I.E.L.D., there's going to be 2 Avenger teams that are still going to kind of continue the Civil War fight against each other. Spider-Man's going to have Back in Black time with the movie, and then we're going to reboot with Brand New Day. Okay, X-Men are going to do this. Okay, Daredevil's going to do this. They kind of realized Captain America's going to die, and then they were thinking about it, thinking, all 6 issues of this and other tie-in books are making Tony out to be the villain. But we got to justify why Tony has his own, like, pretty much has 2 books with Mighty Avengers and his own book, Director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Why people should buy that book. Oh, and plus he's having a movie next year, so we got to justify that too. Oh, I know. We'll say that Cap was in the wrong. So Cap goes, it's almost like a flip-flop, like out of nowhere, because he sees the fighting. I get it, but he should have never said, "I'm wrong. We're on the wrong side. This is not what we're fighting for." He should have said, "I don't want us to kill each other no more. I'm just going to surrender because Tony's not. I'm going to give in. I'm going to be the big man and say I surrender. Arrest me." Instead, it's no. He's right. Look it, we're unregistered and we're trying to kill each other. And we're unregistered for what? Breaking the law? Tony, arrest me. I'm wrong. It's like, no, because he doesn't do that at all. Every other issue, Tony's the devil, he's the good guy, and then out of nowhere, arrest me. I'm wrong.
Yep, that's basically what happens in the final issue of the Civil War miniseries, and at the end of Amazing Spider-Man number 538, Peter goes back to the motel where Mary Jane and Aunt May are staying, and prior to this, we had seen a few little snippets of the Kingpin actually plotting an assassination attempt on Peter. But he gave the assassin a strict order of, if Peter's not there, take out anybody. So ultimately, what ends up happening is the assassin aims for Peter. Peter's spider sense detects it, and he and MJ duck. Aunt May is not so lucky. And so Aunt May ends up getting shot, and the end of Amazing Spider-Man number 538 is a shot of a bloody Aunt May with Peter screaming "No!" And that's the end of the Civil War arc in Amazing Spider-Man, and that of course leads into Back in Black, which leads into One More Day. We're not going to touch on Back in Black or One More Day. Actually, tonight we're not going to touch on those in this episode, but I do want to get
Trust me, I don't think we have enough time for us to touch One More Day, because I'm just warning you right now, John, you will not get a word out. Jam will not get a word out. If any other person who ever been on the history on our shows is on there too, they won't get a word out, because that whole episode I'll be just ranting, screaming, and raving, because I still to this day hate One More Day.
I'm not a fan of One More Day either. It's in my opinion, it's the worst Spider-Man story ever told.
And here's the stance I took even back in Brand New Day when you had the fans that liked Brand New Day, and they have a right to like Brand New Day, and the Marvel writers and editors who were like, well, One More Day can't be counted as the worst comic of all time, because if you like Brand New Day, then you're welcome. Like, look, that's the stance they take. You're reading the book, you like it, you're welcome. All the stories you like right now, well, that wouldn't happen with One More Day, so you don't appreciate what a great story it is. I take the stance of the Batman reboots that everybody loves with Christopher Nolan, those movies would have never happened if shitty Batman and Robin wasn't made. Because that movie was so bad they had to reboot Batman. So basically, you're telling me then that I should now love Batman and Robin, and it's the best Batman movie of all time because if that movie wasn't shit, we wouldn't have got the good movies afterwards that rebooted. That's basically the stance Marvel's taking.
Yeah, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But I want to get your.
But hey, at least for a few months they're married again, so this brand is kind of pointless until the storyline's over and whatever happens. But for right now, they're married again, so.
I want to get your general thoughts on the ending of Civil War. How did you feel about, obviously, Aunt May being shot? How did you feel about the Kingpin's assassination attempt? Hit me with your best shot, James.
I was like, when is Back in Black coming out? Because it was like, at the time, like, there was a lot of people who were mad at the book, and it was obvious that's what Marvel wanted. They wanted to purposely do something to make you mad at me as Spider-Man. Oh, Aunt May got shot. Oh, he took off his mask. Oh, the government hates him. They're all after him. Oh, he's going to want to kill somebody now because of it. And it was all to set up One More Day, like I said. But for me, as a fan who was only reading the book for like a couple of years, like I jumped on it. This was 2006, 2007. I was only on for like a year and a half, 2 years. And so I'm still relatively a new reader. I'm like, oh, this is actually a pretty good story. I actually kind of like this. Back in Black, I'm a fan of the black suit. I love the look of the black suit. From the old issues I have read of the black suit, I liked it. I liked Spider-Man 3 kind of, and that was the tie for Spider-Man 3. I liked it in the animated series. I like the black suit. I think it's a really cool suit. Oh, he's going to put it back on again. Oh, Eddie's going to be in Sensational. Is Eddie going to rebond with the black suit? Is Peter going to rebond with the black suit? What's going to happen here? I was actually waiting for Back in Black, and then at the ending of Back in Black, like, just to sum it up, I was like, oh God, this is so depressing. Peter broke all these laws. He's willing to kill Kingpin. How is he going to get out of this? Like, what's the problem? What is One More Day going to do to get this Brand New Day? And then at the end of One More Day, I'm like, you sons of a bitch! It's like got worse. It got from Aunt May's shot, but if she dies, she dies. She's been in the comics since forever. So if she dies, she dies. I really want to see where Back in Black goes. And then Back in Black comes, and I'm like, wow, this is really dark. Oh, I don't really like this Spider-Man. I hope whatever causes Brand New Day is a good thing and One More Day, this One More Day is a good thing that causes Brand New Day. And then by the end of One More Day, I'm like, you sons of bitches, I'm going to punch you all in the face if I meet you.
The opinions of James.
I went to my high school that next day, cut class, went to the back of the woods, took my friend's lighter because he smokes, and I burned those comics to the ground. Actually, I let my friend borrow my copy of them, because it was like a week or two later. Because I'm like, my friend, this is shit. You want them? He goes, okay, I'll read them. And then he gave them back to me. So me and another friend went to the back of the woods. I took his lighter and I burned that son of a bitch to the ground. Like, that's how mad I was. And yeah, I know you're looking at me. I ruined comic books, and nowadays I'm like, I would never do that. And if I do find the Brand New Day, One More Day issues again, if it's a good price, if it's like cheap, I will buy those issues again. Probably if I see them in like a back issue bin. I will pick them up because I'm a completionist, and it's like a big glaring hole as those 4 issues of Amazing and those last issues of Sensational and Friendly Neighborhood. So I'm a completionist where if I see them, I'll buy them again. But if it's not worth it, I'm not going to buy them again. I don't care if I burn those comics. They deserve the burn. He made the deal with the devil. They should burn in hell.
Oh, jeez.
Well,
James, don't hold back.
I probably hate One More Day.
Well,
You know how much I hate Superior? Imagine that times 1,000.
Oh man, that's.
And I
don't want to think about that.
I blame JMS for it, and it's not because JMS wrote One More Day. It's because I came in during the JMS era. You see the JMS files, you're going to see I'm a huge fan of his run. And it's kind of like, if he didn't make me fall in love with this marriage, I wouldn't have been so pissed off when it got ruined in One More Day.
All right, so my final thoughts on Civil War. I was not a big fan of the ending with Cap surrendering. I was not a big fan of that. I was not a fan of the fugitive status. The Aunt May being shot, it's an interesting idea. The execution is questionable in the later issues.
Because it's just
it's really
to get to One More Day. Like, it's sad that I keep on going back on it, but that's what hurts the storyline. A storyline that I actually kind of like was the Spider-Man. I felt like the Spider-Man books were the best of all of Civil War, even better than Civil War itself. But what kills it is that you know that everything is just to set up why One More Day, not why they're doing it. It's not setting up the storyline One More Day. It's Marvel trying to justify and saying, see, we had to do it.
Yep. And so I think overall we'll give Civil War a thumbs up, thumbs sideways, or thumbs down. So Civil War in general for you, James, was it a thumbs up, sideways, or down?
It's like, and if we go, like, you'll see this also when I go over my GMS files, it's like how I originally felt as a new fan reading these books, and how I feel now going back on them. And some of them, like, especially those early GMS, I'm still positive. I still like to know some of the best Spider-Man stories of all time. This one, it'll be like, if you would have asked me this in 2006, 2007, when the storyline was going on, I would have been 2 thumbs up. I liked it. Now it has to be in the middle because we know what's happening, but if I had to judge it just solely on the book and not focus on One More Day, it's kind of in the middle. It's in between thumbs up and thumbs sideways.
I agree with you. I'm a thumb sideways on it as well. I think removing the art from the artists, to give a term, removing the comic from the creators and their intentions. It's an interesting story, and I think that there are good parts to it. There are good parts to it, but it's seriously flawed in a lot of ways. I don't think it's bad enough for a thumbs down. It's almost kind of like a thumb in between a thumb sideways and a thumbs down. So it's like a thumbs. We'll call it a thumbs 60 degrees.
Yeah.
We'll call it that.
Because, like I said, because while I was rereading this and I was getting ready to review it, I had to keep on psychic mind blocking myself and saying, don't think about One More Day, don't think about One More Day, don't think about Back in Black. Because I was ready to go, it's like, it's a thumb sideways just solely because I like it, but because of what happens later. And you can't judge that. It's not fair to this story to give it the sins of what comes later down the line, to blame it for what happens later. So I had to, like, go back to, but I couldn't be the fanboy I was when I first read it, first read, oh my god, this is awesome. I had to be fair to how I feel now about it, but I also have to be fair with not let what happens later judge this book. Let this book stand on its own. So that's how I come up with the in the middle between thumbs sideways and thumbs up.
I'll call it like a thumb southeast. A thumb southeast, okay?
And I'm a thumbs northwest.
So I guess that. I guess I guess that's going to do it for our Civil War discussion, and I think that's going to do it for this episode of the podcast too. It is 11:30 my time at night, so it's getting pretty late. I'm pretty sure my parents are like not happy that I'm like talking at such a loud volume at such late at night because they both have work in the morning, so I better shut up. So we'll do final shout outs before we cap this episode off. So James, you want to give shout out to anyone, anything?
Not so much a shout out, but I want to give a recommendation. I just recently reread this issue, and I went on a rant on it, and I went on a few forums. I reread this one shot because of binge years, and this one. I mean, literally, I was going for my long boxes because I'm putting all the volumes now that 18's the end of volume 3, because the way it sounds, I think the rumor is they're even going back to the original numbering after it. So I'm like revoluming, putting this comic away, going over my long boxes, and then I go for this, and I'm like, okay, it's been a while, maybe it's not as bad, and it's still bad. Because first, I played this game on all the forums. Let's play Who the Fuck Doesn't Belong, John? Let's see Gwen Stacy, Peter's college sweetheart, the first girl you can truly say he ever loved in comics. She's the main love interest, played brilliantly by Emma Stone in Amazing Spider-Man franchise. One of the good things that even people who hate the series say they like is the portrayal of Gwen Stacy. She's the perfect angel. She's the girl who everybody would dream about, according to Marvel, over the years. Black Cat, one of the few characters from the 80s to stay in the book to this day. Only the Hobgoblin and Eddie Brock can also say that. She's sexy. She's the only other girl to come close to Mary Jane and Gwen. She is popular. She gets her own books that sell. And the fandom got pissed off when they made her a bitch and an evil villain. Mary Jane, Mrs. Spider-Man, in some universes, the mother of his daughter and his child. The love interest, Mrs. Spider-Man, who's been in 30 years of continuity, never leaving Peter's side until one more day. Every comic book fan, even people who are not comic book fans, anybody who knows Spider-Man knows Mary Jane. The main love interest in the original Sam Raimi trilogy, who even, granted, if you like Kirsten Dunst or you don't like her, people will always, when they think Kirsten Dunst, will think probably Mary Jane, her portrayal of Mary Jane. Or Carly Cooper! Carly Cooper! Carly Cooper! I can't even say anything.
Because Carly Cooper. Because Carly Cooper.
Yeah, so that's my final rant, is that god-awful comic. Don't get me started on that Gwen Stacy story where it's all Gwen saying how perfect Carly is, because I'm probably gonna choke somebody if I have to go through that again.
All right, so in order to avoid that, I'll give my any other shout-outs?
Like I said, no, and that's why I did that, because I could honestly not think about a shout-out right now.
Okay, I'll give one. I'll give a few shout-outs. Shout out to John Oliver, Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. Watch that. That's a very good show. Shout out to oh man, what show was I just gonna shout out to? I just completely forgot. I completely lost my train.
Butterfield, who just officially got signed as Spider-Man.
Did he really?
No, I just thought I would say that to see what your reaction was.
Oh my gosh! I just went on my phone to see if I got an alert or something. Oh, okay. Thank you for making me look stupid. I'm gonna go over there and cry in shame right now. I am literally.
It just popped in my head. It's like, what if I told John that Asa Butterfield actually did get cast?
Well, I'm gonna go over. Well, you know what, James? You've just inspired another shout out in me. Shout out to Mr. Andrew Garfield. Because I know that there is one.
We're going off the air now. We're not getting started another rant about how he should have never been fired.
No, I'm not going to say that. What I was actually going to say was I know that there are certain people out there who would punch me in the face for saying that. And you know why I say that? One, because I love Andrew. But also, two, because I kind of love to see the rise that people get. Because for some reason, his name seems to spark hatred within the fan community now. Whatever.
It's because supposedly he was a dick. Because of that story we heard about him being a dick.
Yeah, which I've heard like 3 different versions of that story. Um, I'm not going to comment on it because
I'm not gonna
I
get
don't
caught
think I.
out. I've never been that way to actors. I personally like Toby's portrayal of the character, but you don't see me being like, oh my god, I gotta defend every goddamn thing Toby does. Because guess what, people? Actors aren't role models. They're human beings just like you and me. If they're an ass to somebody, well, they're not an ass to me, so I don't care. Just like I don't care if my neighbor's an ass to somebody.
And to be honest, I feel no need to either trash or support Andrew with whatever story that people are throwing around about him. The public may judge as they wish. I feel no need to. Andrew's a big boy. He can take care of himself. He doesn't need the support of an 18-year-old kid.
Wait a second.
So
Wait a second. He started acting like a douche to people, and starting the stories, he started acting like a douche and completely out of character from what we heard of him before. And a few months ago, you made a joke to me and Jan about you wanting the mind swap with him. Admit it, John. You're the superior Andrew Garfield.
I don't think I ever made that joke. I think you guys put those words in my mouth. I really do. Okay, we're gonna go off the air on that note. So we'll see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye bye. Watch AGR.